Alright guys, we've almost completed the basics of Angular reactive forms. So now in this lecture, let's look at another awesome feature in Angular reactive forms, which is nested form groups. Think about it guys, in our form we have an address bar. It's just a simple text area. But in real world applications, sometimes we might need to collect more details than just the address, like street address, city, state, zip code, and even country. So in these situations, we can use nested form groups to organize our form controls in a more structured way. This allows us to group related form controls together, making our form more organized and easier to manage. So let's look at an example so you guys can understand this clearly. Alright, so first let's add a few inputs inside the form. Let's start by adding input fields for street address, city, and zip code. We'll organize these fields under a nested form group called address. This structure will help us better manage and validate these related form controls as a single unit. So down here, after this text area, add an input. Let's add the input for city. Let's copy and paste the name input down here with the input label and change this label name to city, input name to city, and for now just remove the form control name binding. Next, duplicate this 2 more times and change the label and name to zip code. Then change the last one to country. So now we have the inputs. Let's define the input form group. So guys, in the component TypeScript file inside our main form group, let's define another form group for this. Just like we did with the previous form group, we'll name this one address. We'll also add the address text area inside this new form group. So we'll use the address key. Now remove the existing form control instance and create another form group instance. How do we do that? Very simple. Just add the new keyword followed by form group. After this, add the parentheses. Now inside these parentheses, define the form controls for this address form group. So first we have to add a form control for the address field, add the key as street, and assign a new form control instance to it. I'll do this a little faster. I think I don't need to explain form controls again, right? Wait. Before we move on to the next form control, let's add validation to this. So first add the initial value, then add the validation array, and add the required and min length validators. Next, add form controls for city, zip code, and country in the same way. Each of these will also be assigned new form control instances with their own validations as needed. Alright, we've successfully created the nested form control. Next, we have to connect these form controls with the inputs. So let's begin with the text area. Now I want to assign this text area to the street form control. So remove the existing binding and add the form control name as street. Next, you guys can see here that we are getting compile errors on these error messages. Just keep that for now. We'll come back to it in a minute. Alright, next, let's connect the rest of the form controls with their corresponding input fields. For the city input, add the form control name directive and bind it to city. We'll do the same for zip code and country inputs, making sure each input is properly connected to its respective form control inside our nested address form group. Now that we've connected our form controls, let's update our error messages to reflect the new nested structure. We'll need to modify our error message conditions to properly access the form controls within the address form group. So let's update our error message for the street address first. Instead of using userform.getAddress, we now need to use userform.getAddress.street to access the nested control. Because now the street form control is inside the address form group within our main form. That's why we getting the compile errors on the if statements. So let's properly update this inside the get method. After address, add dot, then the form control name street. As you guys can see here, after I updated this, all the errors disappeared. Next, the same pattern will apply to our city, zip code and country fields as well. So copy the street error message block and change the form control names and the error messages according to the relevant input field. Change street to city and update the error messages to something like city cannot be empty and the city min length error message. Then do the same for the zip code. And lastly for the country field. Perfect. Save everything and check it in the browser. Click on the address text area and click outside of it. We have an issue. The validation isn't working. In fact, it's not working for any of the form controls in the address form group. So guys, what's going on here? Why these validations are not working? Can you guys tell me? So guys, if we look at the browser console, we can find this error saying that cannot find control with name street. So likewise, we are getting this same error for the city, zip code and country. So guys, the problem here is since these form controls are nested inside another form group, we can't simply reference the form control name directly here. In order to fix this, we need to wrap these form controls inside a form group name directive. So let's add a div element around all our address related fields, the street text area and the city, zip code and country inputs. Inside this div, add the form group name directive and set it equal to address. This will properly connect our nested form controls to their parent form group. That's it for the implementation. So save all the changes and go to the browser. Let's test out our nested form group implementation. Try filling out each address field. You should see the validation messages appear appropriately for each input. For example, if you leave the city field empty, you will see the city is required message. And if you enter a zip code that's too short, you will see the minimum length validation message. The nested structure not only helps organize our form logically, but also makes it easier to handle the form data as a cohesive unit when submitting the form. So let's fill out this form and submit it. Inside the browser console, we'll get the form groups value. As you can see in the console, our form data is nicely organized with the address fields grouped together under the address property. This hierarchical structure makes it much easier to process and work with the form data on the backend. When we submit the form, all the address related fields are automatically bundled together, reflecting the nested structure we created in our form group. Additionally, this nested form group structure provides better code organization and maintainability. It makes it easier to validate related fields together and apply group level validations if needed. The hierarchical structure also maps naturally to how the data will be stored and processed in most backend systems. You guys will understand this better when we start working with our applications. So guys, this is a simple use case of nested form groups. Hope you guys got the idea. Alright guys, in this lecture let's explore form arrays in Angular reactive forms. Form arrays are a powerful feature that allows us to create dynamic form controls, meaning we can add or remove form controls at runtime based on user actions. This is super useful when you need to handle dynamic lists of inputs like adding multiple phone numbers or email addresses to a form. So guys, in this lecture, we'll look at a basic example. Imagine you have an input field where you want to collect the user's hobby. How do we do that? A single user can have either one hobby or maybe multiple hobbies. In this case, we have to collect and store multiple user data at a time. So for this, we have to use the form array. Let's see this in action. In this example, we'll add a single text field, and when the user presses the enter key after adding the hobby, we'll push that input into the form array. First, let's set up the input field in the HTML form. So let's add a new input field after our address section, add a label for hobby and an input field with type equals text. That's it. Later, we'll add an event binding to handle the enter key press, which will trigger adding the hobby to our form array. Now we need to implement the form array in our components TypeScript file. First, we'll import form array from @Angular forms, then add a new property to our form group called hobbies. This will be initialized as an empty form array, and we'll create a method to add new hobbies when the user enters them. So let's add the import. Up here inside this same imports, add the form array module, because this also comes from the same Angular forms module. Alright, next inside the form group, let's define our form array. So inside the form group, after this address form group, add a new property called hobbies and set this equal to new form array followed by empty square brackets. This will initialize our form array as an empty collection that we can add hobby form controls to later. Now we need to create a method to add new hobbies when the user enters them. Let's create a method called addHobby that will handle adding new hobbies to our form array. So down here, create a method called addHobby. Next, add the parentheses and the method scope. Now inside this, before we add the form array logic here, we'll set up the HTML template first. We'll need to bind an event listener to the input field to capture when the user presses enter. So in our HTML, let's add a keyUp event binding to our hobby input field. We'll call our addHobby method when the enter key is pressed. So inside the input, add the keyUp event binding. So inside brackets, the event is keyUp. Next guys, I want to trigger this keyUp event only when the enter key is pressed, right? Not all the time. So for this, inside the keyUp event binding, we have to add event filtering. So add .enter after keyUp. This will trigger the event only when the enter key is pressed. Alright, now bind this event to our addHobby method. And last, don't forget to add the parentheses. Perfect. Now next we have to send the user typed hobby to this onSubmit method. How do we do that? We can use template reference variables for this. Add a hashtag followed by a variable name like hobby input to the hobby input field. Then in the keyUp.enter event binding, pass hobby input.value to the addHobby method. This will give us access to whatever the user has typed in the input field. Alright, next let's capture this value from the addHobby method. So inside the component TypeScript file, first add the parameter variable to capture this. Now inside this addHobby method, we'll need a parameter to receive the hobby value from our input field. Let's add a parameter called hobby of type string. This will capture the value entered by the user when they press enter. Next, just log this parameter variable and check whether this is working or not. So save this all and go to the browser. Type something in the hobby input field and press enter. You should see the value logged in the console. This confirms that our event binding and method are working correctly. Now that we have the basic setup working, let's implement the actual form array logic to store these hobbies. Now let's implement the form array logic. Inside the add hobby method, first we have to access the hobby form array. So guys, how do we do that? Same like before, we have to use the get method. So down here, the form group, which is this user form, now use the get method to access the hobbies form array. So after this dot get, add the parentheses. Now inside these parentheses, add the string hobbies to get the form array. So guys, next we have to push the value that we captured from the hobby input. So after this, add dot push and then the parentheses. Now guys, as you can see here, we are getting a red underline under this push method. If we hover on this, we can see the error. Property push does not exist. So what's going on here guys? Can you tell me? So guys, the issue here is that the get method returns an abstract control type, which doesn't have the array push method. The push method is only available on array types. So we have to convert this abstract control type as a form array to access the push method. Alright, let's do this. Just remove the push method for now, and after the get method, use the keyword as form array. So guys, this will convert it to the form array type. Now we can access the push method, but in order to access this push method, we have to assign it to a variable. Let's create a variable called hobbies array and assign it to the form array. So add const hobbies array equals and then assign it. Now we can use this hobbies array variable to push new form control instances. Alright. So after this, use the hobbies array variable, add dot, and you will see from the drop down that we have the push method available now. After that, open the parentheses. Now inside this parentheses, we have to pass the value that we want to push into the form array. So in our case, we have to push this parameter variable. So add that here. Now before we move on, let's log the hobbies array values so we can check whether it's working or not. Inside this log, add hobbies array dot value. Now save this all and go to the browser. Type a hobby in the input field and press enter. Inside the console, as you can see, we are getting a type error. Type error. Control.setParent is not a function. What's wrong here guys? Our push is not working. The issue is that we need to wrap our hobby value in a new form control before pushing it to the form array. When we try to push just the string value directly, Angular throws this error because it expects a form control instance. Let's fix this by modifying our push statement to create a new form control. So back to VS Code, and inside this push method, remove the parameter variable and instead add a new form control. Now inside this form control parentheses, add the parameter variable. That's it. Now save this all and again go back to the browser. Let's test our form array implementation. Type a hobby like reading and press enter. As you can see in the console, we get an array containing our new hobby as a form control. Try adding more hobbies. Each one will be added to the array. This confirms that our form array is working correctly and is storing each hobby as we add them. Cool, right? So guys, we successfully completed the form arrays. Now in this lecture, let's quickly look at how to load and display our hobbies on the HTML template. We'll need to create a section in our template to show all the hobbies that have been added to our form array. For this, we can use Angular's for loop syntax block to iterate over the hobbies array and display each hobby in a list format. Let's do this. Alright, now let's add a new section in our HTML template right after the hobby input field to display our list of hobbies. For this, we'll create an unordered list element and use for to loop through our hobbies array, displaying each hobby value. So inside the template, after this hobby input, add an unordered list, so UL tags, and inside that add the li tag. Now add the for loop syntax block. How do we add that? Hope you guys remember this. So between these UL tags, add the @ symbol and the for syntax. After this, add the loop parentheses and the loop scope. Next, inside this loop parentheses, we have to specify the data that we want to iterate. In our case, we want to iterate the hobbies array, right? So for this, we have to access the form array that we created. Inside this parenthesis, add hobby of user form.get hobbies, controls, and don't forget to add the track by index. That's it. So guys, if you look at this, we are getting a compile error here. We can see a red underline under this controls. It says property controls does not exist on type abstract control. If you remember, we had the same problem when we tried to access the push method, right? So we need to do the same thing here. We need to cast the abstract control to form array. But guys, we cannot do this type casting inside the HTML template. So how do we do that? Very simple. If you remember, inside our add hobby method, we assign this converted form array to a variable, which is this hobbies array variable. So if we can access this variable directly inside the HTML template, we can solve this issue. But guys, we have a problem here. We cannot access this variable outside of the method scope. This is declared within the method scope, right? In order to access this outside, we have to make it a global variable. So let's create a global variable called hobbies array at the class level. Add this line right after our user form declaration. Private hobbies array, form array. Next, cut this assignment from inside the add hobby method and paste it here. Now we can use this hobbies array throughout our component. Next, remove the const hobbies array assignment from the add hobby method and update the method to use the global hobbies array variable directly. Just simply add this keyword before hobbies array. That's it. Perfect. Alright, now inside the HTML template, update our for loop to use the hobbies array global variable instead. Replace userform.get hobbies controls with hobbies array.controls. This will give us direct access to the form array controls without needing typecasting or any conversion. Now as you guys can see, we are not getting any errors. Perfect. Alright, let's move on. Now inside the li tag, add string interpolation and show hobby.value. That's it. So guys, with this user form.get hobbies controls, we're telling Angular to iterate through each control in our hobbies form array. The dot controls property gives us access to all the individual form control instances within the form array, allowing us to display each hobby value in our template. This approach ensures our list stays synchronized with the form data. Hope you guys got the idea. Alright, now save this all and go to the browser. Type some hobbies and press enter. As you guys can see, we are getting the hobbies displayed in the unordered list. So guys, we've successfully implemented both the ability to add hobbies to our form array and display them in real time on our template. This pattern demonstrates how form arrays can be used to handle dynamic collections of form controls in Angular. Wait, before we move on, let's see how to remove these added hobbies from the form array. To implement hobby removal, we'll need to add a delete button next to each hobby in our list and create a method in our component to handle the removal. Let's modify our HTML template first to add a delete button. Then we'll implement the remove hobby method in our component class. So inside our template, inside this li, after the hobby text, add a button tag. And between these button tags, add the text delete. Now from this button, we have to call a method on the click event. So add the click event binding. Inside brackets, add the event, which is click, and bind this to a method called remove hobby. After this, add the parentheses. Now we also have to pass the index of the hobby that we want to remove. So inside the remove hobby methods parentheses, pass the index variable. Now that we have the button and event binding set up, let's implement the remove hobby method in our component class to actually remove items from our form array. Back in our component file, let's create the remove hobby method. This method will take an index parameter. So create a parameter variable and set the type to number. Inside this method, we'll use the hobbies array variable with the remove at method to remove the hobby at the specified index. This method is provided by form array and makes it super easy to remove items from our collection. So take the form array global variable, that is this hobbies array. After this, add dot remove at. Inside the method's parentheses, pass the index parameter variable. That's it. Now save this all and go back to the browser to test our remove functionality. Type a few hobbies and try clicking the delete button next to any hobby. You'll see that hobby gets removed from the list immediately. Cool, right? This demonstrates how easily we can manage dynamic form controls using form arrays in Angular. Hope you guys got the idea. So guys, this is the simple use case of using the form array in Angular reactive forms. Using this form array feature, we can easily manage dynamic form controls in our applications. Whether it's handling multiple hobbies, education details, or any other repeatable form elements, form arrays provide a robust and flexible solution. The ability to add and remove form controls dynamically makes it perfect for creating interactive and user-friendly forms.